Welcome to the Simply Be Found Huddle, where you have Dean and Rob that talks about everything inside of business and marketing. Today we have our guest, Vince. Welcome, Vince. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. It's Friday, guys. As we're doing this, it's Friday. I feel great. I'm ready to slam some drinks and sleep in late. Like I'm ready to go.
We're in the adult beverage crowd right now, guys.
Yeah, Rob, you said that's a whiskey barrel behind you, right? Like, what's in there? What's in there? Yeah, because I could use some of that.
So that was Stranahan's whiskey.
I've never had that.
Stranahan's is actually a pretty good whiskey.
It's actually Colorado based, isn't it, Rob?
Yeah, it's Colorado based.
Okay, I'll keep an eye out for that.
Yeah, it's a good whiskey. Do not go and start drinking it like you would Jack Daniels. You will end up passing out on a pool table if you're inside of a suite. We have a casino up in Blackhawk, and I ended up getting a huge penthouse suite for $50 because their system messed up when they first opened, and they allowed me to book it. And I was like, I'm going to book that. Ended up being this huge suite. Well, I tried drinking Stranahan's just like I would Jack Daniels, and that no.
Yeah, okay, that's a good warning. I appreciate that. That's good to
know. So just make sure it's a little bit of a stronger whiskey.
Yeah, okay. Not a problem.
Like I said, we do everything unedited and unfiltered. So there you go.
Exactly. So Vince, I've got to ask the question on your headline. It says you went from a spinning prize wheel to a national voice. Tell me a little bit about you, and then we'll dive into this thing a little bit.
So pretty much everything in my life after college up to this moment is the result of an accident. Like it's what happened was I got out of school. I thought I was going to get into like television or comedy or ads, like something. I just thought it was going to be something creative in that way. And what happened was I got a call from my uncle. I was working at a pizza shop, just a place called Bertucci's, and I was like slicing pizzas and running the takeout counter, which I was terrible at. And as I'm doing this, they call me and ask, he's like, I know some people in sales and radio that are looking for help. Like, are you interested in doing that? And I told him no. I was like, actually, I do not want to do that at all, but thanks. And he called me back a couple days later and said they're also looking for somebody in promotions. So I had never thought about working in radio. I never considered it. I never really listened to it outside of some music stuff here and there. But I got the chance to get into talk radio, sports talk radio in Philly. And like, I'm a Philly kid. I'm a sports nut. I had Eagles jerseys. I watched every game. I played Madden obsessively. And so it was one of those things where like, I never considered it. But once this opportunity popped up, it was like, oh my God, this makes so much sense. Like I have to do this. So yeah, I was in promotions for a long time, like setting up tents and tables and spin the wheel, get a t-shirt and doing all those kinds of things. And it was crazy. I mean, because it's sports talk radio in Philly. Like it's basically professional wrestling. You know what I mean? Like it's a wild place to be. So
I've got to interject this. My niece and her husband's from Philly. She was military, so she went around the world. And I've got to make this comment. Nobody likes Philly fans. She has a T-shirt that says, "I'm from Philadelphia. Nobody loves Philly fans."
Yeah, I mean that's it. We have the song "No One Likes Us, We Don't Care."
So like
that's it.
Singing that the other day, they were visiting, and I went, "Oh my!" So I feel your pain.
Yeah, so it's crazy. It's a crazy scene, but it was cool because for me, I mean, I got the chance to get in the door and be around professional radio hosts, and these were guys that for me growing up, like I saw these guys on TV and doing Eagles post-game shows and all that stuff, like they're local celebrities, and to have the chance to work with them was like, oh my God, like this is a huge opportunity in front of me. And I had been, when I got out of college, I started a sports blog. Like, this is how oblivious I was to the whole thing. I literally had started a sports blog and a podcast and was writing articles and never considered working in sports. Like, I just didn't think it was a thing. I didn't consider sports radio. So I get the chance as I'm doing promotions to basically moonlight and study behind producers. Like I would come back to the station from working these shifts, packing everything up, unloading it back into the station. And I would just sit there from like 10 o'clock at night to midnight and just ask these guys like, hey, why did you hit that button? What's going on here? How does that work? And I was able to, once they needed somebody to pinch, I got the call because I learned how to do it. I was around. Guys were talking me up as an option. So that's what I did to get in as a producer, and I did the same thing as a host. I would talk to guys after these shows and go like, hey, I noticed you set up the topic this way, or like you did this thing with a caller. What was the reason behind that? And they didn't get asked those questions very often. So it was cool for me because I got to pick their brains, and like I was obsessed with the art of hosting, like what makes a good show and how do you drive the conversation and keep it engaging. And I wanted to entertain people but be informative because I like football. I like the strategy. I like the stats. I like working contracts in ways. Like all the things that go into that were fascinating to me. So to be able to talk about it all the time and do that professionally, like get paid to do it, was like, oh my God, like I never considered this, but this is it. So yeah, I mean, from let's see, 22 to like 24, I was learning the ropes in the back end. When I was 25, I got my first hosting shift, which was like crazy. Like there had only been 2 other guys in the history of the station that had gotten a show, just even a single slot for one night at that age. So I was super fortunate in that way. And by the time I was 29, I was hosting a nationally syndicated show with CBS Sports Radio. It's just like
cool.
a wild ride. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's an awesome journey. So from all that experience, you do a ton of stuff inside of the podcast world. What are you doing right now?
Yeah, so I'm an executive producer for shows, and what I do is I help business owners. So the whole idea is so many people are starting a podcast for their business because they know it's valuable. It's a great way to get content, build relationships, all these different things, and it's fun. So it's like, oh, I can do marketing that I actually enjoy, and like that's great. But when people start these shows, I think tactically they miss a lot of things because what you see with podcasting is it's a new industry still, as much as it's been around for like 15 years or something. Like it's still pretty new.
Right.
And all the examples that people have mostly are entertainment shows. So you see the topics that people talk about on those shows. You see the way they try to monetize, which is like sponsorships and selling merch and stuff like that. And as a business owner, like it's not practical. It's not the route to go. It's a totally different approach. And so what I do is I help these people who love podcasting and have the passion for it and want it to be a part of their business. I help them do that in a way that, is going to save them time and get the message out in the places that they want to do it, build the relationships that they're looking for. Like whatever their strategic goals are with the podcast, my job is to just help them back that and like go all in on connecting the podcast to the business and getting those things done.
So a lot of our members and a lot of the listeners that are listening to the huddle are small business owners. You have contractors, roofers, you have painters, you have financial people, you have chiropractors, you have the gamut's out there for a lot of things. So a big thing I talk about is you have to have the natural language to be able to make AI work, to be able to generate all of your content, everything from social media to your blog. You can utilize that to do it. So I talk about how you do it from voice by talking to your chat GPT or your AI, or taking video, recording the video, uploading, get the transcript, and then working that. I think podcast would be an amazing piece for a small business owner to use to be able to reach their market. They might not have the major amounts of view counts, but they're going to create a relationship, and they're going to be able to create all the content that empowers their marketing so they can talk about real life scenarios. What's your opinion and thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, podcasting is a gift in that sense, right? Because it does everything. It can cover so many aspects of your business. It's really crazy. I mean, for me, so we started a show for ourselves because we had the typical, like, small business cobbler's shoes thing, right? Like, we weren't putting time into ourselves. We didn't have our own podcast because we were busy helping other people with their shows. And
I know nothing about that.
Right?
Oh, no, we have all these things we say, and we don't find the time to do it ourselves for ourselves sometimes. That's the cobbler's shoe story. I agree.
Yeah. So we were living that, and I just looked around and I'm like, man, we got to be our own client, and we decided to start our own show just in October. And for what we were able to do with that, I mean, before I literally, because I've been working on like for sales stuff, I'm building a whole case study, right? So I'm using our show that we built as a case study for launching shows and the kinds of impact it can have. And I realized and I didn't realize it was this bad. In the 3 months prior to starting the show, we posted a total on all of our platforms. We posted 29 times, which is nothing, 10 posts a month, not even. So nothing. Once we started the show, and then used it. And our express goal was awareness. We want to get on as many platforms as possible. We want to be as active as possible. Like, we just want to be a stream of content in all of these places and consistently post. So once we did that, let's see, it was 289 total posts in 3 months with the show. because we were on Facebook, we're on Instagram, we're on LinkedIn, we're doing the YouTube episodes, but we're also doing YouTube Reels. Like, and to be able to put it in all of those spots because we're just getting the same clips. Like, everything takes vertical these days. So we're just making clips in vertical and we're just posting all the time, whether it's the episodes themselves, hey, go check it out, or all the different stuff that's value. And it was a game changer for us. So like to be able to do that so easily is why we did this anyway. Like it's why we started the business. We knew it could help people like that. And to be able to execute it in that sense has been great. And the benefits of it have been unbelievable because like, I mean, one, more people are like, dude, I see you on LinkedIn all the goddamn time. You're driving me crazy, which I love that. You know, I've had like 5 different people come up to me and just be like, oh my God, dude, you are everywhere, which is great. I need to be top of mind. And from that, like the people that are in my network, they're not a client, but they're referring people to me who have mentioned podcasts because somebody mentions it and they're like, oh, I've seen Vince posting about this. I'm going to call him. Like those kinds of wins are not the direct things that when you look at data, you can always easily track. But it's the kind of stuff that you just go like, this is working. My business is growing and it's undeniable. So yeah, I just completely believe in it. And Rob, all the things you're saying, like that's it. We've been able to do it ourselves, and to be able to help other people do that, like it's a gift.
Right. So one of the things that, you know, what's been good about it for me is Rob has a hard time getting me to get in front of the camera, period. I like to talk to people. Like I enjoy, you know, this kind of, you know, discussion and things like that. So he's getting me in front of things a little bit. So I'm part of the face of the company. But the big thing is you know, I didn't do it. I did get out there, but not enough. Do you have a recommendation for frequency of putting out? I mean, it all depends on so much, but, you know, is there some rule that you like to follow that says this gives you the best results if you're getting started?
Yeah. So one of the biggest things that I encourage is honestly building up a big lead with your content before you even post anything. Like if you're just starting a show, the idea is rack up episodes. Be 4 weeks ahead, be 6 weeks ahead, be 8 weeks ahead. Like whatever's comfortable for you and you can manage. Because when you take it from a couple of standpoints, one is time management to say, okay, this day, this week, this time, this is when we do the show. That's something that makes it easier because you've built a lead. And let's say, okay, well, you normally do it Tuesdays at 2 o'clock is when you're free and you record. Well, if you're sick, you have vacation, whatever it is, no problem. You don't have to worry about, you're not scrambling, you're not stressing, which means it's easier to go back to it and continue doing the work. And so that's one way to do it. And beyond that, just batching episodes can make it easier too, because that mindset, right? Like being a person out in the world and doing your day-to-day business and gearing up to do shows and execute that, be thoughtful in the kinds of topics you want to talk about or be engaged in interviews. Like that's work. That's a mental space to be in, and it's different than what you do all the time. So if you can get in a spot where, hey, I'm going to sit down, we're going to do 2 episodes back to back, and that's going to be our system because now you're in it. You've got everything set up. It's all in one place. You don't have to move. Like that makes it easier for you. And same thing, like if you're building a lead, it's easier to say, okay, well, we record for 2 straight hours. So if we miss a day, we're 4 weeks ahead anyway. Next week we'll record 2, and now we're 5 weeks ahead because we missed 1 and we added 2. You know what I mean? Like those are the kinds of things that are simple time management tricks that make it easier to say, okay, I'm in control of this. I'm not stressing about this. I can do this pretty consistently, and I can get it out as much as I need to.
And see, we did a little bit of a different approach to that whole piece, and I'm building a case study on this as well. We went 2 feet in. We're doing 5 podcasts a week that we're publishing out. We publish out at 5 a.m. every day. I'm not too sure I like the 5 a.m. post time, just from what I'm seeing from stats right now.
Okay.
But that's how we end up pulling all of our content for our shorts. That's how we pull all of our content for everything. But we have enough guests that come in and do it. And then we also record. So Dean and I will either record right before, like today we recorded before this one, and we'll probably do another one after this. So that way we have stacked up information. So someone goes on vacation, we have enough to be able to back that in. But the only way we could do that side is doing the raw, doing the uncut, because we produce so much content. Now, we use different software to be able to make that happen. So we use StreamYard where we record the main episode in, and then we use Opus Pro to be able to cut our shorts, which is an amazing product.
Yep.
And then obviously StreamYard has some of that as well. We also utilize Descript for how everything kind of connects and does that whole side. I'm not going to get into the tech side of it. And then we use RSS.com for distributing out to all of the networks. So far, it's been amazing for that piece. So I'm kind of curious to see for and I think there's a difference between what kind of crowd you're going to as well, because in the B2B world, we have so much that we can talk about for a show like ours. And if you're talking about someone who's an electrician or someone who's just doing a podcasting as a full-time gig, your target market has everything to do with what you're doing and how you're doing it. Because we might have one show that ends up having 5 views, and then it might grow over time because it sits there. But we might also have another show that does 300 views, and it's all over the place. You never know what's going to hit. So my approach is to be able to do a lot. And Dean will agree with me probably on this. I've always been the type that if I'm going to do it, I'm going to go 2 feet in and balls to the wall all day long. What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, I mean, 5 days a week is a grind. So respect for you guys to be able to do that. I mean, it's a ton of content to get out.
Lots of coffee.
Yeah, there you go. Lots of coffee. And one of the things that I thought was interesting and I think is smart when you guys do this, because when we went through the whole process of just getting me on this show, one of the things you mentioned is like, hey, for the interview, it might be Rob, it might be Dean, or it might be both of us. Like, we'll see how it goes. And I think that's the right way to approach it. Like, if you're trying to do 5 conversations a week, if you're trying to say, hey, well, it's got to be both of us for every single one, like, you're dragging the whole thing down. It's not ultimately the point. It's, hey, how can you build relationships with as many people as possible, have good conversations, and see where it takes it. So I think strategically in that sense, I totally get it. And the bigger thing would be, if you're having a hard time scheduling, or like, how far ahead are you guys? Just out of curiosity, let's get meta here. Like, how far ahead are you with episodes?
2 days.
Like 2 days. Okay.
2 to 5 days, 4 days.
4.
Yeah, we try. We
have 4 days worth of content. So I was going through content today because I had to bring a different assistant in that's handling some of the stuff. So we had a gap where we didn't do any shorts over the last couple of days. And I've got like 150 messages inside of Podmatch right this second that I have to respond to. We haven't created the whole Cobbler's Kid piece comes into this because we haven't created our Podmatch or our podcast page yet on the website that'll streamline everything and put our automation there. We have the tools. Hell, I developed some of those tools, but for how much content we have sitting there, I currently have about 76 long videos that are just myself talking that aren't podcast.
Okay.
And then I have roughly 4 to 5 videos right now. Actually recorded that one this morning. So 5 videos ahead right this second that haven't been published yet.
All right. So here's something I would tell you guys, and I actually just wrote a newsletter about this that's going to be out in like 2 weeks, 3 weeks, about the same thing. Is like, if you're looking to have an easier lead on all of this stuff, don't worry about, okay, how can we start building that lead and like put it into place next week? It's, let's say 2 months from now, we want to have a lead built in. Then start recording people now, like double up on episodes and things like that, with the idea that, hey, once it hits, I don't know, June or May, like then, okay, now we've got all these things we're going to start to structure out, and it's going to make your lives easier because you know what I mean, is you've recorded some extra episodes here and there. Now you've got a week to play with where you can just continue to build on that. So as much as you can do it that way, that'll probably make your lives easier. And like, that's exactly the kind of stuff I work on, because people get buried. Like, to make the posts and all, like, the beauty of repurposing a podcast is it can go everywhere. It can give you all this different content. That's an incredibly deep thing that you can get, and the impact is real. But at some point, I mean, the workload to do it is hard, and you got to try to make it as easy on yourself as possible to do it. So yeah, I'd recommend that stuff and help you guys out too. Like solo episodes. Do you do any solo episodes?
We don't do any for the podcast as solo episodes. We haven't done any yet. But I do solo videos. Dean does a couple training videos. Him getting on a video by himself is pretty slim to none.
No, I don't.
Most of our members would be about the same, because I mean they're terrified of putting themselves on video and have the same exact piece. I'll hop on video all day long because I love talking to myself. Apparently,
yeah.
We were talking about that during our warm up. I mean, I've always liked to see myself in a mirror, so it really goes hand in hand for some reason. My dad used to get pissed at me about that when I was a kid. Now I just made a job out of it.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing, right? Yeah, I would never shut up in class was my problem. So what do you know?
Same there too.
Yeah, but it worked out well. And like, I'm kind of like Dean in a sense where like I hate social media, honestly. I don't like being on there and posting a lot of stuff. For a lot of times for me, it feels performative. For example, just on the simplest level of, let's say it's my wife's birthday or something, right? I'm not going to be like, honey, I love you so much. You're the best. Like, I'm not going to do that on Instagram because she's in the room with me. I'm just going to tell her. You know what I mean? Like, I don't need to do that kind of stuff. But that's how people are these days. I'm not that way, so I don't do it. And it's in the same way it's hard for me to post for the business sometimes because it felt forced, which is why before we did the show, I didn't get any content out at all, So it's like, okay, well, let me scale it back and just do the show and talk about all these things within the industry, and that simplifies everything for me, which means I don't really have to write social posts. I'm just creating a caption for the thing that I've already done as a podcast, and to make it easy in that way has allowed the feed to thrive. So yeah, finding that balance of stuff is hard to do, but once you find it, it's just
it's
such
amazing.
a gift. Yeah.
It's amazing. And I mean, Dean and I would have a conversation like what we do in the podcast anyway every morning. So all we did is we just changed it to where instead of we'd say that on the phone. Well, shit, we're having this conversation on the phone. Why the hell aren't we recording this?
Yeah.
Because it's all content.
Right.
100%. And for what it's worth, I mean, one of the things that I think you guys do well, and like I really enjoy about our conversation right now, and a lot of business owners don't do, is it's an actual back and forth. Like, it's nice to talk to somebody and get on one of these things and be like, no, let's have an actual conversation, because a lot of people miss out on that. And when you're running a guest show, it's easy to fall into that trap. Because, obviously you want to bring these people on, you want to build relationships with them, and to some degree, you want to give them a chance to go off. Like, hey, get those sound bites, get those clips, like, make those impressions with the audience. You know what I mean? Like, that stuff, it matters, and that's why people come on these shows. But you got to take those opportunities, too, to be like, hey, I got some opinions, and I got some ideas, and I got some stuff that I'm doing, and I can help, too. Like, it's your show, it's your audience. You know what I mean? So, like...
Well, the thing is, we don't like to roast anybody, but we like to have a little back and forth, because you don't want to humiliate a guest in any way, shape, or form. But on the flip side, if we don't agree, we don't agree on something, And so my question to you, while I go down that road, you talk about a lot of social. Do you spend any time putting this information on your blogs, on your website? Or do you have a website, and do you have those links there as well? I mean, because we talk about the whole ecosystem of between social and listings and website, how that all ties together with how customers find you, if you will.
Yeah, so what we have currently with the website is we have a link to the show. So we have, like, on the homepage, I mentioned, all the stuff about what we do and some of the clients we have, but then I have a link to the show. So there's a whole section there that just says, hey, we have the podcast. So I promote it that way. In a sense, it's just a living proof of concept. So, hey, here's the show that we do, so you can get an idea of what we're about. And then I have a link to this newsletter and sign people up there. So I would love to get to the point, and I've looked at it, because one of the things, I'm big on automation, and I would love to get it so that things from my newsletter are just automatically a blog post on my website. So that's something I'm working on. It's just not a priority yet. So because I gave it a try, and I'm like, all right, this is going to take more research and work, and I got to add like a new service or something, and I'm just not ready for that right now. So I'm just going to keep it as the newsletter as it is. But yeah, I mean, I would love to get to that point, and I think that's one of the values. The only thing I've done additionally where I think you get a lot of value is getting the show and using things on the show to create free handouts, for example. So we have the 9 steps to start a business podcast. Like, that is a PDF that we give out. It's the exact process we use for our clients. And it's something that I'm going to build out as episodes. So then once people get that PDF, they can go episode by episode. I can have links in there that cover each single step. And like, what a great dynamic, easy way to tie those things together. So I want to work on those connections. There's definitely ways to do it. If you guys are getting regular blog posts, that's great. And it just comes down to finding more ways to continue to tie it together.
So I noticed when I was going through your stuff, and I agree with you on that. I'm gonna add into that a little bit. So I noticed inside of your stuff, you have, I think, 4. So we have 3. Too many crickets. I'm gonna lose my train of thought now.
3 pillars.
So I mentioned you have 4 pillars. See, I went 4, and my brain did not get that whatsoever. I just. But I noticed on your website you have 4 pillars. We talk about 3 pillars all the time. You have content, you have authority, and you have trust. So your 4 pillars I found really kind of interesting, and we're kind of we build onto that, and we use what's called a tree format for how we talk about it for as an analogy. And it starts with your listings down at the very bottom. That's going to be going out to all the different listings networks. That's going to be your root base. Your website is going to be your trunk. And I think podcasts follow the same piece. You have your website, that's your trunk. That's where all the data comes to, where you can really utilize that side. Then you have branches. You have branches like social media. You might have video spots that are mainly for YouTube and that type of thing. Then you might have over here, you might have a different branch that's your podcast. But once you bring all those branches together, it really can produce a lot of content. So when you produce out your actual podcast, I'll end up taking this. It'll end up being a transcript. It's part of our whole process that I've just finished up and finalized of this is what I think it's going to be. But this whole piece is going to be a whole blog post. It's going to have the video right inside of that blog post. Then social media can link into that. And it brings your tree all the way together for how those branches are. And it brings a lot of those pillars up because it's going to fill inside of the content side. It's going to fill into the trust side and also your trust factor, because now you're putting out this content. You are a trusted source. This will help you when someone goes to talk about something in a topic inside of AI. This will help inside of social. This will help in everywhere for SEO when you put that together. What were your 4 pillars inside of there, and what do you think of that whole concept?
Yeah, so the 4 pillars: purpose, money, message, and process. And for me, that's just, if you're going to run a successful podcast, those are the 4 things that you need as a business owner. So why are you doing the show, right? That's the purpose. Like, why are you doing this? What do you want to get out of it? Money is, how does this make money for you, and how are you viewing monetizing? Because like I said up front, if your whole thing is we're going to start the show and we're going to get sponsors on the show, like, no, you're not. Unless you have a massive business already and a massive following, you're just not going to. And I'm not saying that to be rude. It's just like, it's the fact of the matter. That's how the industry is. You're an entertainment marketing vehicle. Like, you're not going for mass audiences. So
you mean you're not going to be Mr. Beast right out of the gate?
I know, right? It's shocking to believe, but it's just the truth. So it's, like trying to frame things in that understanding of, okay, you're doing the show, you have these different goals. Like for me, it was awareness, right? I want to get clients through awareness. So I'm making sure that I'm absolutely flooding all my social media channels and just consistently producing content between there, the newsletter, YouTube page, like a podcast feed, all that different stuff. So that was the goal to start. We're doing pretty well with that. We're going to be putting more gas on that. That's our short-term goal. So that's money. Message is the kind of thing that we're talking to and the audience that we're talking to. So I talk to existing business owners primarily. As much as I do start shows, like I mentioned, the 9 Steps Guide, it's easier to sell, frankly, and it's a better client for me when it's somebody who has a show already, because they get it, they've made the investment, they want to do it, and now I'm helping them fix a thing rather than create a whole new thing and a whole new processes and all that kind of stuff. So I'm very clear in the kinds of people that I'm talking to and the kinds of specific topics that I have for those people. So that's message. And then process is all the ways to get that stuff done. How are we recording episodes consistently? How are we going about booking guests on our show? I promote the show in part by being a guest on other shows like this. This is part of my day-to-day, making the content consistently and improving all of that stuff. So I spent 2 hours yesterday just working on a custom GPT that writes in my voice. How do we get all these different clips and write captions and do that easily? I've got a custom GPT that has a lot of stuff that's me. So great. It's constantly improving all that stuff to keep that flow of content going. So those are the 4 things. I think you're completely right when you're talking about having that trunk, that stability, that consistency. Like, where are you pulling people to? Where is your home base? Yeah, you're going to bring them to the website. Like, that's your way to go and land those deals. Do it. And everything else is just an opportunity to either send them to another thing that you've got. So if the podcast leads to somebody following me on Instagram, or my LinkedIn brings somebody to the YouTube channel, or whatever it is, all those things eventually are leading home. It's, hey, set up a call. Let's talk. Let's go figure this out. You're doing that through a website. Like, it's all very matter of fact once you get down to it, but there's a lot of parts to it. So yeah, philosophically, that's generally the whole breakdown of the idea.
I think that's awesome. So if you're working with, say, let's use a contractor, for example, and they want to be able to start a podcast, what would be your advice to them when they first start off?
Yeah. So what do you want to get out of it? Because you're doing the podcast to do what? And you could say,
they want to generate leads from a podcast.
Great. So you want to think about, okay, who are the ideal people that you want to talk to, and how are you creating a space where it's easy to have conversations with those people that they want to have, right? And that's going to be the goal. So if it turns out, for example, I work with business coaches, right? Like a number of my clients have been business coaches. So, okay, what are the kinds of businesses that you want to talk to? Great. Let's have the show where you're designed in one way or another to bring those people on and give them a space to talk about it. Like I had somebody, a coaching client that I work with, this was just 2 weeks ago. So they help businesses like executives and things with difficult conversations. So they help them when it comes to firing people, negotiating raises, building community, like a better work environment. That's what they do. But the people that they were bringing on were other coaches that do the same thing or similar things, which is not their client, obviously, right? You're not going to hire somebody who does exactly what you do. So I gave them the whole advice of just get executives on your show. They're looking to get booked on shows. Bring those people onto your show and ask them about difficult conversations they've had. Like, let them promote what they want, but use it as an opportunity to say, yeah, and like as you were doing all these things, building these great empires or writing these books and whatever on whatever principles, like what were the difficult conversations you had to have along the way to get there? And now they've worked in what they do. They've got their ideal client sitting in the chair. That person wants to have the conversation. It feels like the right space for them. So it's a win for everybody. And you got to find the way to do that for yourself. So based on the specific niche, the kinds of people that you want to talk to, how are you framing those conversations in a way that gets those people to agree and it feels natural and it's something that promotes you at the same time? Like, it's a tricky and specific thing, right? Like, I ask a lot of questions before I build a show, but that's the kind of stuff that really matters and I think is the artistry of it.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting that the analogy, you have the questions, what you want to get out of it. We do the same process with marketing plans for people. What are you trying to get? Where do you want to go? How do you want to get there? But like, let's say that you are getting with a small business. Do you kind of go more with the idea of what we call evergreen content, stuff that's kind of timeless? But is that the best thing for some businesses, or like every day for us is a little different because we see trends and shifts, and we really want to make sure that all the businesses are aware of it. But some of that is old, not old school, but it's traditionally set, and there's not a lot of changes in it. There are some things. How do you approach that? Do you kind of go with the evergreen content so that people can go look at old episodes and listen to things, or where do you go with that thought process?
Yeah, so generally it's evergreen just because for a lot of people, the principles are the principles, right? Like I tell people when they're doing a show that I want to know about you. I want to know about your business. What are the things you believe in? What are your philosophies? We talked about my core pillars, your core pillars. Like I have an episode about those core pillars because it's what I do. It's what I believe. It's what I'm teaching people. It's part of my business. So a lot of that stuff just happens to be evergreen because the principles, and even from a contractor standpoint, right? There's a certain right way to put up a wall or make adjustments in a house. Like there's processes for that. There's philosophy behind it. It's proven and it works and it's good. So you don't have to mess with those things. Just let people know that that's how you do it. And if you have specific things about your process that, hey, maybe for certain builders, they might want to hire you to join that job because your specific way of doing things to get that stuff done is unique and they like that and they want to hire you. It makes you stand out. So finding that is part of it. When it comes to the evergreen stuff is like, what is your personal approach to those things that makes you unique and gives value to your potential customer? And then on the other side of it, yeah, I mean, it is industry specific, right? I've worked with people in real estate, for example, that's a newer client of mine, and they have trends all the time. So their things are going to come and go, and some of that will age well and some of it won't. But also, there is opportunity, depending on your mindset and approach, to take that older stuff and go, well, here's a prediction we had a year ago. How did this work and why? You know, like that's something interesting, and it's something I learned in sports radio, because for sports radio, it's always, hey, this team is going to win this game, and this guy is going to have this kind of day. Like it's all these bold predictions of the game, and to be willing to confront the opinion when it's wrong, especially, builds trust. Right. And it's an opportunity for, in that case, more for entertainment to just like take a beating from the fans of, hey, you're wrong about this, you stink. But from the business side to be like, okay, well, here's what I thought in this scenario was going to happen. Here's what happened. Let's go through it and see what we can learn from this experience. So as much as that stuff feels trendy, it doesn't mean that you can't use it again down the line. It might not be something you can just easily throw out again and again and again, right? So the reusable value does get limited, but there are ways still to even get more out of that a year, 2 years, whatever later.
And I think you can take that to the next level too, to where if you have a contracting business or real estate business, this could be used for multiple types of businesses. It's kind of what we do inside of ours is if you do have two business partners, or you have a business owner and you have a salesperson or an operations person, whatever it might be, where you have two people, you can get in, you can talk about jobs that you've worked on. This is the types of things I'm seeing inside of the market. I had this kind of roof repair because it was hail, or whatever might be inside of going on inside of your world. Now you can take that and talk about it. Now that goes back into that principle of that gives you the content that lets you take a blog, make your blog out of it. That lets you take it, make your social, and put everything together, because now you had a real conversation and you have some real pieces there. And back in the day, and I think this is a great use of podcasts, and tell me if you're wrong, if you think I'm wrong on it, but I think it's a matter of being able to show that you're real. So back in the day, for a lot of contractors, they did door-to-door sales. They did all these different things that would have to happen, and you could only hit so many doors inside of a day. So, or talk to so many ups inside of a car lot if you're on a car lot, or whatever industry you might be in. But inside of video, you can build a relationship with somebody without having to really talk to them, by having a conversation, because now they get to know you. And I think that's a great use and form. Not only are you get as much content as you want from it, but you could build that relationship by using the podcast.
Yeah, and it's great too, because you're not necessarily talking directly with them, right? It's not one-on-one, but you are talking to them. Like, you are saying, hey, I know your business, I know your problems, I know the ways that you need help, and I'm going to talk about all the things that you can actually do to make that better for you. And so what beats that? Right? To do that consistently, to be top of mind, to have people in your network see you do that again and again, which just builds more trust with your network even. So if somebody says, hey, like I said earlier, do you know somebody in podcasting? Yeah, I've seen Vince. He's got 30 great sound bites about all these different things. He knows what he's talking about. You got to talk to this guy. Like that. Think about the warm up that I'm getting for these people to come in, right? Like that's such a gift. And that's the thing you can build again and again and again, because that's all you're doing is just producing value. A couple of times in this episode, I've mentioned people that I work with, like to be able to share stories of clients that you have and the wins you've gotten with them. Like those things are incredibly valuable. It's social proof. So to be able to do all of that in one place, it's crazy how deep the potential is. And since it's all personal relationships, especially for the small business owner, and you're doing this on tight budgets and all, like your time and your presence is the best thing you've got. And everybody's going to say yes to a podcast just about, and not everybody's like, hey, can we just hop on a call? So, to just present it, that little sidestep, it's the same thing. It's a conversation. It's mostly digital. And to be able to get people to say yes way more often than not, like I don't know how you don't do it.
Well, we're doing a whole shift, and speaking to that whole piece of phone calls, where we don't even talk to anybody on the phone anymore. And we're going to put a spot on the website, part of this whole redesign and putting the podcast into our website. We're actually going to put it onto the website to where if they want to hop on a call, we'll break down your whole entire marketing thing. Because if you have that problem, somebody else has that problem. And I think that's the new version of what podcasts are, because podcasts used to be back in the day where you wanted to get all these subscribers and you wanted sponsorships and all of these things. But when you do it as a business owner and you're looking for sales and leads, you're not looking for the volume like a Mr. Beast of the world. You're looking to be able to provide information to be able to reduce your sales time, build trust, build confidence, and be able to get people to contact your business that actually want to do business with you.
100%. Reducing sales time is a big one, because that's been one of the hardest struggles for me, right? It's a podcast, like especially for people starting a new show. Then it's part of the reason why I've moved away a little bit more from launching the shows as much as I still do it, because to get people to understand, hey, this is the show, this is all the philosophy behind it, this is all the things you can do, this is the work that's involved, and this is the price. It's people are like, oh, well, I can see why this is tremendously valuable, but I don't want to pay for it right now. So for me, a lot of times it's this super long tail. It was a lot of like hemming and hawing from people, and it just got to a point where I'm like, okay, I need people, if they're going to come to me and they want to start a show, they have to be like very dead set on they're ready to go and this is what they want, because otherwise it's so much work for very little result. Sometimes those shows start and people aren't patient enough, so they quit very quickly, and it's a long game because all the things we've talked about, you're owning your audience, you're getting people to all these different platforms, you're upping your follower counts, you're building more relationships, you just create opportunity everywhere. And if you're not willing to invest in that, then that's fine. But for me, I need to find people that fully get it, and to be able to make content like this makes it easier to find those people, and that's why I do it.
Well, one of the things that happens when you go out and meet potential customers or clients or whatever, they like to mine your intelligence. They're mining information from you, and I don't mind it to a point. But the big thing is get people to commit, and we have a lot of information, and this is a good way to do it without them taking up your personal time for the sales call. And I call that mining data, or mining your information, or mining your knowledge base, if you will. So you kind of feel that in your world a little bit too?
Oh, yeah. People are always asking me a bunch of stuff about it. People that are curious, or they've started a show and they're not ready to pay for anything and they know it. So they're always like, hey, can I ask you some stuff about this thing? And and depending on what it is, for some level, I will talk to people and give them some feedback and put them in a basic direction. But the other thing, and this is the benefit of making this content now and doing it so consistently, and on the higher level, starting to pay more attention to the things that people are asking me and trying to turn that into content. Because now I can start to have conversations and say, okay, what's your basic problem? Oh, I've got an issue with this. Oh, well, it turns out that I did an episode about that. So here's 10 minutes that are very dedicated. Go check out that thing. Go listen to this and come back to me. Or it's in the newsletter. I'll go forward you that newsletter. So from having that kind of stuff, it simplifies the process. It's answering their questions. It's building trust. And when it comes to the point where they are ready to actually get help, then they'll go and do that. So that's how I try to reduce it. And then the other side is just, I used to take 30-minute calls universally, and I'm way more selective on that. Yeah, I see Dean shaking his head. Yeah, and that's the truth. Like, I cut it down to 10 minutes. I
end up providing all this. Oh, sorry, Dean. I end up providing value on those calls. So I provide all this value on the call, and somebody else could have used that same amount of information. And 9 times out of 10, they didn't do anything with it anyway. So it was like I just went through and I put my heart and my soul into that whole sales call, when I could have solved it inside of a video and also reached a lot more people than just that one person at 30 minutes.
Yeah, it's huge. I mean, the time sink is tough. And so, how do you find ways to limit all of that process and keep it succinct? I've gotten more into just diagnosis mode. So I'm not trying to deliver value as much in those calls when I'm prospecting people, as much as I'm just trying to ask the questions to realize what their problem actually is. And if I can just get them to that point, then okay, I might give them one major piece of information that helps them with that problem. Hey, you probably need a different recording software or something like Opus Clip, like you've mentioned, or whatever it is. Like, here's a thing that you can go do. You want to go solve that, that's it. But by spending most of the time just like digging to the true root of what their issues are, because especially for my field, I mean, it's such a specific thing and people are so inexperienced with it that what they might think is the problem is not even close to the problem. Like, it's something 5 layers deeper than that. So I try to just dig down, get to that. It helps me too for long-term prospecting of, is this a good client? Do they truly get it? How have they invested in this? Like, how committed are they? So I do that. It's mutual benefit for the long term. And yeah, I just give them that information and take it from there.
Dean, do you remember what you were going to say?
No, I was just kind of going down the same road. Is people get a little frustrated because we don't really do the calls like we used to, but like Rob said, we can just get so much more information out because most people have the same questions. And so that's a great way of getting the information out. That's where I was at, because I agree with Rob that we spend hours, with talk with people, and then they'd hem haw around and then never commit. and you gave out all this wonderful information, and then they're the ones who received it. So that's a great way of sharing the information, because we do that when people request support. We'll say, oh, watch this video because I think it'll answer that question, because Rob's done so many YouTube videos that have addressed a lot of those things.
Yeah,
right. I mean, it got
a ton of time.
I mean, it got to the point where I'd be on a call and I'd be like, I got a video on that. I'll just send you the video. Like, I mean that, and since I recorded the video, I know where that video is and I know I have it. And then sometimes I'd be like, well, shit, I don't have a video on that. I'll record a video really fast. Yeah. And I'll get it published, because apparently I didn't publish that, and I could have swore I did, but hey, it's a great video. But I mean, I think that is the new world of the podcast area, and how businesses can use that to be able to really grow their business and be able to streamline it. So then you also have your podcast where, they're treating it like the radio show. And that's really where I want to see the huddle go to, is where it feels like that radio show, having that actual conversation. Because when I was going and I was being a guest, and still when I'm a guest on different podcasts that are out there, they have their set of questions. And it's like they follow that same script on every single one of their calls. And it's like, that's not me, for one. For two, it's not a true conversation. You brought that up as well, Vince, inside of this conversation, that it feels like, we're all having this conversation together, rather than it being just a scripted, here's what we're going to talk about today. What's your opinion and what's your advice for podcasters on that?
Yeah, if you're going into every conversation with the same exact questions, and you're actually asking the same questions every single time, you're doing it wrong. It's really that simple. It's just not what it should be, and I think you're limiting not just think. I know for a fact that you are limiting your opportunities significantly in terms of the quality of the conversation, the relationship you're building with that person, the perception that you're giving to your audience, whatever it might be. It just caps everything, because there's no personality in it. Right. You're coloring in between the lines, and that's it. And so to get people in different industries with different stories, with different opinions and whatever, like you have so many places that you can go, and all you need to do is be genuinely interested. It shows you're either not genuinely interested in the people that are coming on the show, or you're not doing any preparation work whatsoever, and it's a lazy way to get around it. And that's just the simple fact of it. So it's either, why are you doing this? Do you still enjoy this? Is this something you want to do? Why are you bringing all these guests on if you're not actually interested? Are you willing to do episodes by yourself instead, to make it easier for you, and something that maybe you'll engage with a little bit more? Like, those are the kinds of things that I wonder about, because I've been guests on those shows. I've seen that kind of stuff, and I just don't get it. Frankly, I just think it's a massive waste of time.
It is. And I think what is very interesting, and you said this before you came in, I don't care what we talk about, let's just have a conversation. I'm curious if you get that when you're going and being a host, or not a host, but being a guest on the show. Do you get the people that look at you like, really? You can just, and I find that it's usually the well-polished, the guys that, have all these college degrees, and they have this, corporate feel to it. They're probably the worst at that than anyone, because they can't get out of their shell and actually be able to pivot and be able to actually truly go bounce from this idea to this idea to this idea to this idea, and be able to keep it all around the same topic.
Yeah, and honestly, that's one of the best values of being a guest, is you get to be put in these environments where you don't control the conversation, and people are asking you about things, and you have to evaluate, did I give good answers on this? Is my messaging right? I've had times where I do interviews, and then I walk away and listen back and go, I really could have been better on that answer. I got to tighten up my messaging there and really examine this opinion further and be clearer about it. So that kind of stuff is great opportunity, and it's the same thing when you just open up the conversation and let it ride. It's taking risk to get better, because so much of it's public speaking. So are you saying the right messages about your business? Are you connecting with people? Does it make sense? If you're getting on shows and people are arguing with you, is your philosophy right? Or are they just behind the curve? You got to examine those kinds of things. But it's a beautiful and easy way to reflect on what your business is and what the message of it is, and does it work? Does it make sense? Does it connect with the right audience?
So we as podcast hosts, we don't even control the narrative. we just let it go. I mean, we're like guests on our own show, because we don't know where it's going to go. And that's what makes it so much more fun, because you'll say something I've never thought about before, and I'm hearing you say some things. I'm going, that's a great plot. That's a great point. I hadn't really looked at it that way. And then we can expand on it some. So I think that's a really good approach to it.
It's the depth of everything, right? Because for me, when I do a lot of these shows, when I prepare, like if I'm having a guest on my show, I do a pre-interview. It's a 10-minute pre-interview. It's very to the point. I've got a couple of questions that I'll ask them because I'll look at their profile, look at their business, listen to the show for a couple of minutes, and it just gives me a chance to get to some core stuff that I'd like to get to on the show. And so from there, once I get into the interview and do the actual episode, I'll start right in the heat of it. I don't do long intros. I'll just go. I had a guy on my show recently. His name's Mr. Productivity. So it's his whole business. He helps people be more productive. So first question is just, what is productivity in your mind as the expert on it? Let's get into it. And from there,
I watched that one.
You did?
Yeah, that was a good episode.
Awesome. So, yeah, and like notice, it's just right to the point. It's a strong question. It hits the conversation on a deeper level. And by doing that, the depth that I get over time, because he's elaborating on something that's strong up front, like you go so many different places faster, which means where you can go in 45 minutes, it's almost like I got a head start on the episode. And those are the kinds of things that I like, because otherwise, if you don't allow for that kind of, if you don't work to get that kind of depth, then you're not going to reveal new things and have conversations that people aren't aware of and haven't experienced before, because it takes time to get to those things. So how do you get to these deeper, more specific conversations faster is everything, and it's something I'm very passionate about. So that's how I try to apply it to my guests.
So I'm going to ask you a question. I'm going to pick your brain real quick on the intro. Do you find that how do you keep people engaged at the beginning? I mean, we have an approach that we want to do, and I know everybody has different approaches. I see some people do the hook, what we're going to talk about today, and then they introduce themselves. Do you find that there's one technique that's better than others, or does it depend on the information you're trying to disseminate?
Yeah, so I think when you're first getting started, go ahead.
I'm going to toss one thing into that, because I was thinking the same thing. So it's going to be kind of that same answer for you, Vince, inside of there, I think. So if we use this episode for an example, we started off talking about the whiskey barrel in the back. So you have that piece in the front. Since we do it unedited inside of there, do you need it? I mean, are you really going to capture someone? Or are you going to lose them in that first part for that? And if you add an intro on to that, are you going to lose them even more because you went from the intro to that and now you have even a longer period?
Well, no. So the intro buys you time is my idea. So I always approach it with, and I think for anybody, especially as you're new, getting started, building an audience, you don't have a big name, you don't have the credibility necessarily. So when you get new listeners, they're not going to give you the benefit of the doubt. Then as much as you can set it up for people early of what's going to happen in the episode and generally what the show is, it's good to reinforce all those things. I mean, you should be doing it anyway, just in terms of like the description of the show and the graphics and things like that. You want people to understand what the show's about, but you do need to remind them, and you need to do that consistently, because in that moment, you're trying to solidify your brand in their mind, what this show is, the value they get, and why they should keep listening. So to open up episodes, when I do it solo, I'll do a quick intro, and I'll say, hey, here's this common issue that I'm seeing all the time. I think it's a huge hassle. This could be costing you so much time and money when you're producing your podcast. So today, I'm going to give you a couple of ways that you can do this, that, and the other thing. Welcome into It's Not Just Talking. I'm your host, Vince Quinn. And you know what I mean? I just give this quick, tight intro, and I do that all in, let's say, 45 seconds. And at that point, everybody understands. And now knowing that, hey, I'm going to get information about all these different things, it buys you time. It gives you leeway, because you've promised people that you're going to deliver them something. And if they want that thing, they'll stay. As for as long as reasonable, they'll stay to try to get that thing.
I mean, I notice inside of analytics and going from my data aspect, I'll see people watch a video for 1 minute and 43 seconds at first release. When you put out an hour podcast, they'll watch that first minute and 43. Then in about anywhere between 5 and 6 days, that starts to go up. And my prediction on that is that somebody saves the episode because it's long. They're like, yeah, I think I want to watch that. They hit save now. Now, there's two things that happen inside of psychology for that. Either they're actually going to remember to come back and watch it, or they're not. But the minute they hit watch later, you're going to start seeing more from that person anyway, because the algorithm's going to say, hey, you like this person. Let's go ahead and provide you more content for this person. So it's got a win-win, but it's kind of an interesting piece for the analytical side. My analytical brain goes crazy on that shit.
Yeah, and it certainly can drive you crazy when it comes to YouTube analytics and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, it's big, right? Because the beginning of all this stuff is there's so much content out there. There's so many things for anybody to find you at all. Period on any platform, I think is a gift. Right? I mean, everything's got an account these days. Everybody's got a show. Like, there's so much stuff out there. So for anybody to actually care enough to find me and listen to me is just a miracle. So I always try to treat it of, okay, well, let me try to make this as engaging and worthwhile for you as I possibly can. Because I think one of the issues is people might feel, oh, I'm stuck. My audience is at a certain spot and it's not growing. But the problem is that you might have people that come in and they try you out, but they all leave. Your retention rate is bad. So you have to find ways to retain people. And if they're not sticking around through the beginning, you don't have a clear intro. It's not obvious what the show is about because your title is goofy and doesn't explain anything. Your description is vague and you don't explain to people up front what's going to happen and what the show is about. Then, yeah, I mean, they're kind of flying blind. And it's going to be harder to get them to commit. So you want to make it harder, essentially, for people to say no.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. What's your opinion on intros? I'm going to pick on Joe Rogan, like his Joe Rogan podcast where he has the whole thing. It was at the very beginning. Is that needed inside of a podcast? Or what types of podcasts would that be needed for versus doing it to where how we did it on the beginning of this one, I'll pick on myself for it, where I introduce it every time almost the same way, but it's usually a little bit different because I just don't script well.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I haven't listened to Joe Rogan in quite some time. What is he doing these days for his intro? How does he do it?
Spinning I think it's a spinning graphic and Joe Rogan experience. I hadn't watched one of his intros in forever, and I was thinking, do we need an intro the other day? I was having this whole entire conversation with myself, and Dean and I've been kind of having this conversation as well. Do we put an intro on the podcast? So I was like, let's go see what Joe Rogan's doing. Let's see what Gary Vee's doing. Let's see what everybody's doing that's out there that's bigger. Let's see what Mr. Beast is doing. I'm like, Mr. Beast does his own damn thing. I'm not even trying.
Yeah, he's a different animal, honestly, because the YouTube, yeah, like he's a different beast. But I would bet just offhand, I would assume that Gary Vee is more intentional in his intro than Joe Rogan is. Joe Rogan's he's the name of podcasting. He's built the biggest lead, the biggest show. When people talk, like literally anybody that I talk to that says they want to start a podcast, like, I want to be the next Joe Rogan. Like they all say that. So. You know, it's one of those things where Joe Rogan doesn't need. He can do whatever he wants. He could open the show hula hooping for 5 minutes and nobody would care. Like
nobody would give two shits. So they're hooked already because just the name.
It's built the trust. He's the household name, so he can do whatever he wants, and people are going to say, "Oh no, it's my fault that I don't like this. I'm going to keep watching until I do." You know, like it's just what it is. But he's earned that, and nobody else has really. So that's the problem, and that's what you need to address when you do this. So if it turns out that you can have something that's pre-recorded that you can just do every single time, and it's quick and simple and fast, that's what I would recommend from a workload standpoint. Or you have a quick clip or a quick script rather at the top of the show, and yeah, you hit that every single time. You be intentional that you're opening the show. Hey, we're going to be talking with this person today. They're going to be giving us information about these things, or here's a fun one actually when it comes to an intro, and this is something I learned in sports radio as well. Is I had this one host on a morning show, and he did this thing where an interview would be coming up later in the day. So let's say it's 7 o'clock. He's got somebody coming on at 7:40. So he'd be like, "This person's coming up at 7:40. I got one question that I really want to ask them. I want to ask this guy blank." And from there, people are like, "Oh," you know what I mean? Like, and in this case, it's an athlete, it's a coach, it's something. So yeah, but for that idea, like, hey, we're trying to talk to an expert in this space. I'm going to be asking him this, but first, welcome into the show. This is, you know what I mean? Like, there's different ways to play the same principle, but it's here's something that's going to happen. Here's the value you're going to get. Here's what the show's about, just to remind people and also to introduce to new people as they do come through, and just try to maintain that energy and get them excited and feel special tuning into the show.
I like that. Now, Gary Vee's approach to the whole thing, if I remember correctly, and don't quote me on this because I'm not 100%, but from the ones I watched really quick, he basically just gets right into it and starts talking. But again, everybody knows, anybody in that space that knows Gary Vee can get away with a lot more than what anybody else can inside of that space too.
Yeah,
because
and I would be curious, like titles.
How many
title
how many F
descriptions.
bombs is it going to have today? You know, all that stuff.
Yeah. Can we do a quick experiment real quick? I'm actually going to pull up Apple Podcasts on my phone and see what Gary V's feed looks like. We're live. We're unedited. Let's have a good time, right?
Yeah.
So let's see. The Gary V experience. Yeah. See, like, okay, title.
I didn't look at him on Apple Podcasts. I looked at him on YouTube. So his Apple Podcast might be completely different.
Yeah, so here's the first thing that pops up on Gary V's feed for his podcast is the #1 mistake killing your social media growth. Okay.
Great.
Simple, obvious, clear, know exactly what I'm getting into here. The game has changed. Are you keeping up? In this episode with Gary V, I dive deep into the shifting landscape of social media, why follower counts don't mean bleep anymore. Not sure if I can curse on this show. And how content is the only thing that matters. All right. Shit. It was supposed to be shit. If you were curious and could not figure it out, the word was shit. Yeah, in this episode, we talk about it, and he's got 6, 7, 8 different bullet points. Like, the whole thing is so detailed that title description, he's explained exactly what you're going to get. He's an established household name. You go and look at it, like, it's just easy. So for him to say, hey, this is all the stuff, hit play, and he's immediately getting into it, like, that does work. But I would bet in the same way he's got some kind of hook. Like, he probably excuse me, reiterates the title or something else to that effect to get people to say, yeah, like, I need to stick around. This is exactly what I thought it was when I hit play, and I'm going to stick around to make sure that I get the answer that I want.
No, that totally makes sense. And I think it all depends on what you want to be able to do and what makes sense to your guest. I think it changes between everything. So far in between. But I mean, I think that podcasts are just that great piece. I think a lot of businesses should be doing a lot more of them, even if it's one a month, to be able to get started and then kind of build up from there. It brings so much content into your marketing, brings a whole different world to it. Now, Vince, if anybody wants to get a hold of you, what's the best way they can do it?
Yes, freepodcasthelp.com. So
that's easy,
right? I just bought that domain. It is the greatest decision I've ever made in my life.
Awesome.
So besides getting married, sorry. So yeah, okay. I just want to, I want to specify that. But yeah,
now we watch the cam from off the camera, off screen. Hit you in the side of the head, right?
Yeah, right. That's it for me, folks. Freepodcasthelp.com. I'm doing free 10-minute strategy sessions, and it's a whole personalized thing. So by the time we sit down, I've got some information about your show. Like I said earlier, as we've been talking, I'll ask you some pointed questions about what you're doing, whether you're looking to start a show or have an existing show and get more out of that. And from there, I'll give you some different ways to go and improve the show. So freepodcasthelp.com.
Perfect. That's so easy.
If somebody wants to get that PDF, how do they do that?
So that is actually, I believe it's in the workflow if you sign up as an existing show, or rather launching a new show. So I will double check that automation. If it's not in there, here's my promise. It will be in there by the end of today as we speak right now, which means it'll be in there as you hear this, wherever you're listening. So yes, just sign up, freepodcasthelp.com. You're looking to launch a new show. You will get the 9 steps to start a new podcast.
Awesome.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's been very informative. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Yeah, me too. This was fun.
I'd love to come and be an experience on your show as well. So if you have spots, let me know.
Oh yeah, no, totally. We'll talk about it afterwards. We'll go set it up. But it would be thrilled to do that. It'd be great.
Perfect.
So all right, well, thanks everybody for joining us. So
yeah,
Rob,
thank you.
You do your exit, man, buddy.